Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Savoir podcast. Um, with me is Shilton and Mary. Maybe they can say hi.
Hello and welcome.
I'm Michael, and I guess we can get right to the topic itself. So today we were supposed to cover Full Metal Alchemist, animation as a whole, but we'll get right to that in a second. So perhaps we should start with the overview of what was the first feeling. And I think we should start with Mary because the she's the newest to anime, so she can offer her thoughts, and then we can continue from there.
I thought that animations address societal issues in a very interesting way. They bring it down to your level, and that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. And if we could do that with everything, if we could break down everything and simplify it as animations do,
Mhm.
then probably we'd solve half of world's problems.
Maybe
Yeah,
we would. Chilton,
maybe.
sorry.
This one is maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you have to add, Chilton?
And thank you, Michael, for giving me the floor.
Mhm.
I think a lot of what Mary said is very much accurate. And yes, maybe
Mhm.
these things could be solved with some of the world's problems could be solved by pretty much taking a leaf from anime. But I think that's the whole premise of an anime. It's supposed to jostle people's minds to prop people's minds to or attention to some of these things, and at least being able to give people a platform for which they can be able to relate to a lot of things that happen in their own lives.
Mhm.
And so yes, definitely I think anime is something that's very much underrated in society, or probably that's just my perception or our perception, given the expose that we may have had with people. Then again, I know there's a whole aspect of people watching anime, some for the sake of entertainment,
Mhm.
but all the same, I think some things are very much undeniable and you cannot avoid them unless you really want to.
And I think anime really strikes an interesting balance between entertainment and um, teaching people things, because to start like a philosophical lesson on the audience is difficult. Nobody likes listening to preachy stuff. Nobody likes sitting down and being told, okay, so this is good, this is bad, take this, end of story. So when it comes to anime specifically, it finds a way to sort of discuss these things while still not lacking on the entertainment side. It sort of offers a half and half experience, sometimes to its benefit, sometimes to its detriment. And so, moving from our overview on anime itself, what was your first experience with Full Metal Alchemist?
Well, I think for me to answer that as honestly as I can, I would like to say that watching it recently as a grown man, I mean at the age I am right now, I think it was just a plethora of emotions all everywhere. I mean, for instance, in so many cases where so many tragedies, I think tragedy is kind of like a big theme in this entire show. So for me, that resonated a lot in the sense I could relate with some of the struggles of the characters. And so I was very engaged throughout the entire viewing. All in all, I think it was just a phenomenal experience for me. Very relatable, something I could resonate with strongly. And most importantly, I think I could be able to fish out information here and there in the sense, just be an observer of what is going on and not get entangled with it all.
Mhm.
As a result, I think a sense of catharsis kind of develops
Mhm.
by appreciating a few things here and there in terms of character and the plot.
For me, it was actually a very enlightening experience,
Mhm.
my eyes were open to certain concepts that I knew arbitrarily, but not deeply.
Mhm.
For example, there's something that Armstrong says when he is attacking a certain villain in one of the episodes. I think it's Scar. He says
Yeah, it's done.
you must destroy in order to create. And
Mhm.
yeah, he says you must destroy in order to create. And for me, that um, created a totally different meaning and experience and perception of what pain is. And perhaps pain is something good, something to be embraced. With pain and destruction, the aftermath is creation and building of something beautiful. So right now I perceive pain in a completely different light. It's actually something to embrace,
Uh,
not something to be scared of. Yeah. So, and there were multiple other nuggets by different characters.
mhm.
And I thought, wow, okay, are people really, the kids who watch this animations, are they really able to appreciate the
Mhm.
depth of some of the words said by the characters?
Mhm.
I don't know, or will they probably appreciate them later on as they grow up? Like Shilton said, he appreciates the experience way much more right now than he did when he previously watched the animation. So yeah, it was a highly enlightening experience for me.
I think I share the same sentiments when it came to my first viewing. More so because it also, like you, it happened to be my first anime to watch. It was the first anime I'd watched, and it had this charm to it that sort of knew when to have an upbeat moment and then when to really crush you when it was there. I remember the first time I came across episode 2, which delves into the history of the brothers right before the tragedy that hits them when they try to perform the uh, the name is failing me, but
Transmutation.
yeah, that's the one. When they try to bring their mom back, right? And so they have this very naive perception that just because they have the right tools, like they have everything that makes up a human composition, like you see them stating things like human, like water 10 liters, carbon 6 liters, and stuff like that, as if that is all that makes up a human being. And so one thing that was really interesting was that the story was trying to give a very interesting question. What is the true price of a soul, really? And is a human being just components or parts? Why do we feel feelings towards some people? Why are we sad when they are gone? Yeah, and so on and so forth. And these are very interesting questions that are put upon by Hiromu Arakawa, the one who penned it. And she really put a lot of thought into every single one of these things. She took the time and she really thought about how alchemy would affect the universe and how it would affect every single beat, and so ended up essentially starting up a philosophy class without getting the audience too deep into it. You feel like you're learning something, but you don't know how you got here. You get what I mean, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
true. Michael, you, you said something along the lines of what does it mean to be human? Is it
Mm-hmm.
having a soul or having a body? And that reminds me of this character, I think number 44, 48, 48, right?
48, right?
When he's fight 48, 48, when he's fighting the Full Metal Alchemist.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end,
Mm-hmm.
just when he's been defeated, he says, all our lives we were thieves, murderers, we did
Mm-hmm.
so much wrong and no one ever treated us like human beings. And now that you're bound to metal, you're dignifying us by saying you won't kill us because you still consider us to be human beings. And I think for the Full Metal Alchemist, that had to be true. The soul had to be what defines you as a human being, because his own brother was bound to a metal, and so he sort of extended the same um, perception to these guys who were bound to metal. That is number 48,
Mhm.
and says, "I will not kill you because you still have a soul." And this guy really appreciate number 48 appreciates it so much because he's never been treated like a human being all his life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just
And
thought I should add that.
In
and
addition to what Mary and Michael, what you've just talked about, I think I'll start with Mary. In addition to what makes what makes you a human being, I think beyond that, beyond just appreciating that somebody could actually see them for who they were, which is human beings, I think a more fundamental question arises then if because later on also in the episode you'll realize that confrontation between number 66 and Alphonse kind of brings another dynamic of interpreting what it is that a human being is, where they start questioning memories, and memories has been declared as something that is picked up on. You pick up, you make it yourself, it's made up. So something that is made up essentially, from the understanding, I think, without saying that the human being, or what they're calling the soul or life, I don't know, is pretty much regarded as something that's eternal in many ways. The undertones are there, which, or if not eternal, at least something that is not temporary, something that does not change. So basically, here is an aspect of memory, which is the psychological aspect of who we are, right? And the body.
Yeah.
So what it is that what is it that animates you? So clearly here, there's for a keen mind or a keen eye, definitely there's something that you can pick up on, in the sense that you're not the body and you're not the mind. Then fundamentally, what is it that animates the body, and what is it that makes you you? I mean, there's definitely a big question on that. And then on what Michael talked about, you mentioned, sorry, this is where my brain starts having farts and I can't think anymore. I don't remember now what you were talking about, Michael. Jesus.
right before we got to, I think we were talking about, apart from what it means to be human.
Oh, now I recall. Sorry. Yes. Other than what it means to be human, you talked about how this philosophy of alchemy, the practice of alchemy, has been introduced into the whole story and everything. Yes, definitely. The whole concept of alchemy is not entirely foreign, since a lot of this is dealt in chemistry,
Yeah, true.
whether it's organic, inorganic, or whatever scope or field of it. At the same time, I think animation really brings about this sense of introduces this how do I say, exaggeration of things which are already there. And I think it's a tool they use to very much at least bring out the essence of what the story is about more clearly, more vividly. I think more than it is about elaborating the fine lines or the origins of the philosophy itself, but not contradicting what you're saying. I think just I wanted to add that.
And
Oh, that's my thoughts about it. Mm,
that's true. And when you bring up Barry, the number 66,
mm,
Barry the Killer,
mm, mm,
I remember the first time I watched it, I was really confused about why it took Alphonse so long to recover from being told that essentially your memories are like made up by your elder brother, and like, how do you know you are not actually real? How do you know you're not just like me? And that took the first time I was like, wow, this plot point is taking too long. I really need us to like the next part of the action where we can like, but then I look back and I'm like, a lot of what makes our personality is from memories. And we have this accumulated information gathered through time that if all of that becomes meaningless, then we look back and we're like, but then what exactly are we supposed to remember? Because if you look at something like friendship, you're like, this guy is my friend because, we've been through a lot. We've taken time to be with each other, and we have made memories, right? And so if that just essentially fails, it's as if like the brain just short circuits and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. And I look back and I'm like, wow, it must have been a bit difficult, especially since he didn't like have a human body. At least if he had that, he could be like, well, I still have this, but he does not have that. So memories are indeed an important aspect. And looking at
Yeah,
mhm, sorry.
I just wanted to say, to point out how interesting it is for the ability for someone to just make you doubt your entire life by planting an idea or casting a shadow of doubt
True.
about your entire existence, and then you questioning everything that you have known all along and everything that you have known to be true. So that says a lot about there being a need to be grounded.
Mm,
And if you're not grounded on your own, then having someone who can ground you, because for his brother,
mhm,
Edward,
mhm,
when they, after their fight and Alphonse questioning his own existence and whether it's real, during the reconciliation period, it, Edward reminds him, we did all of these things together. Do you think all of that is made up? And then for Alphonse, that was Edward rooting him, grounding him whenever when he was having the doubts about his existence. So that was pretty interesting. Also,
and it's a theme.
very very interesting for me.
The theme of grounding self back to a sense of humanity is indeed what Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is in a nutshell. It keeps being a theme that it comes back to over and over and over again, even as simple as the aspect of losing their mom. Because when their dad left, they rooted a lot of their reality on their mom, right? She became the
Yeah.
most stable thing
Yeah,
about them. And then she goes and they freak out and they're like, what is going to happen? And so they break from that and they start rooting themselves in alchemy and be like, now this is our new thing. This is the thing that will not break. The others sort of disappeared, but alchemy is here to stay. And because of that, in a sense, they still, I think episode two at the beginning, they don't quite get there yet because they're still hung up on, as you would, by the way, they still have memories of their mom and they're like, let's use alchemy to get mom back, to get back to our state of groundedness. And so they do it and it shatters completely and they end up meeting truth for the first time, who lets them know that, man, this, and you can tell that the brothers still feel scarred by this, because I remember when like Edward was like, it's not like I was wrong, by the way, my whole process wasn't wrong, but if you bring me back to that gate, if I go and look at things again, I am sure we'll find the right answer. I am sure we'll get our mom back. But that fails. And now the brothers throughout the show are in a constant state of looking for something to be fixed with to still remain human. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, Michael. It does.
Mhm.
Oh my, it does. And perhaps maybe in addition, I think if you look at episode one and two, starting from episode one, I think a lot of characters really are introduced immediately from Roy, Bradley, the Edward, the Elric brothers,
The Fiora.
Armstrong, the Crimson, yeah, the Führer, the
Uh,
Crimson Alchemist, well, a few people here and there who are cornerstone to the entire show. But and then season two goes on directly. Okay, before season two, in season one, still with all these people being introduced, there's a very strong sense of character development or character maturity that is expressed in such short scenes, and it's a very, I think episode one has a lot to unpack, and it pretty much holds water for the or base or the entire foundation for the setting of the for the plot of the entire running show, right?
Yeah.
So here we have somebody like Isaac also who was introduced, and then he brings up the concept of he has a certain intent, however it's misunderstood. For him, he feels misunderstood because in his mind it's righteous and all that, and so he goes on to do all these things that whatever he was planning to do,
Mm.
with the creating the big transmutation circle to get
Yeah.
the to get for him to fulfill his meaning of killing Bradley in
Yeah.
or making a nice coughing around him.
Yeah.
And you see somebody else coming and contradicting that. I mean, I think through all this, I think the entire episode one really unpacks a lot about the characters of these people. And I think season two, I mean, episode two goes on to now really unpack what Edward and Alphonse really are, or how they have come to this point of where they are. Because right from the very first episode, you can see how pragmatic, though hot-headed and sometimes get carried away very quickly, Edward is, but at the same time, he has a very keen and sharp mind. I don't necessarily think because it's a predisposition that he has since he was born. Yes, he was bright, but the sense of discernment that he develops,
Mm.
which gets to be realized even as early as the season. I mean, episode one, two, three, all through, it's all there. You can clearly tell very much so, despite the um, how young they are, how youthful they are, 14 and 15 years old. These are people who have been forced to grow up. And I think season two kind of explains the turning point for them, because I think the entire process of trying to transmute their mother and bring the mother back to life was a very big turning point for Edward and Alphonse, which pretty much explains or tries to show how or why it is they make the decisions that they make, however they do. For instance, and also you can see also there's a very very big very big how do I say dynamic, not dynamic. There's a very big portrayal of how the characters have been molded or how the personalities have been molded. Even though Alphonse and Edward went through the same thing, you can get a clash of of ideals between them as you proceed between the episodes 1 and 9. I'm speaking of 1 and 9 because that's what I've recently watched. It's still a bit fresh in my mind, so I know that there is this whole thing where Edward feels a certain way. He carries that even when he speaks, even from the very first episode, you can clearly point out that Edward carries a lot of guilt within him, a lot of resentment, and the resentment is primarily towards him. And you can see how it has molded them both. And I think for Alphonse, having lost his entire body has kind of given him a perspective of others come before me. Well, probably there is also the element of he has that predisposition since he was a small boy, but clearly you can see how these events have molded them in very unique ways, such that it brings a very complex dynamic when they're interacting with one another and people around them. I think that's something that cannot be ignored, definitely. Or what do you guys think?
And I think that whole aspect of challenging beliefs that you talk about is pretty interesting because the introduction of the homunculi, specifically
Mm,
gluttony and lust at the beginning of the
mm,
show, really contrasts well because of how they contrast with the whole theme of being human because uh, they are not they are actually not human. They're like sort of like manifestations of our worst impulses, right? Basically
mm,
put. And so they bring this sort of challenge because you look at something like you look at somebody like Lust, and she is supposed to technically be a one-dimensional character by definition. She's supposed to be a character that represents Lust, but then you find that this character exhibits so much interest. I don't know if I was the only one, but each one of these characters has such vibrance to themselves that they very much look human, right? They very much pass off
mm,
as human. And for others, to an extreme degree, like envy, who has the power to shape shift into other human beings and take their and to confuse other people. And so the question that still comes back is now, well, if this is what, if characters like this are supposed to be human, look like human, what then is one? What do we count as a human being
Human being.
if we have characteristics like this taking such human-like features and stuff like that? So in essence, even within the first few episodes, the show kind of hammers home this feeling that a human being is not limited to one representation. You cannot just define them by one emotion. There is like a spectrum, a very large spectrum of feelings, a very large spectrum of ideas and philosophies. Uh, so yeah, that is a very interesting
Yeah.
thing. Mhm. You are.
Yeah. There's something Shilton said about the story taking on the taking us on a journey,
Mhm.
trying to identify the philosopher's stone and how it's made, and the possibility of Alphonse and Alphonse getting his body back through the use of the philosopher's stone. And at the beginning of episode 2, um, Edward Edward is reading a book and he's trying to learn as much as he can about the philosopher's stone. Then he makes this very very interesting comment that resonates with me on so many different levels.
Mhm.
So he says that these books, they tell you everything you need to know, but not exactly how to find it. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, there's so many times people will tell you things, or a book will explain to you everything about something, and then it won't tell you exactly how you're supposed to do it,
Yeah.
sort of creating this need for you to come back again and perhaps to the same source
Mhm.
in pursuit of something that is not given to you in the first instance. Instance, they
Mhm.
just show you that this is what this could do for you,
Mhm.
but we're not going to give it to you. We want you to come back, and then we'll give it to you in small doses, and
Yeah.
you can come back again next time. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You know something, Mary? I think I found myself thinking along those something along those lines, but I also kind of came to another opinion as well. But like Michael said, we have to appreciate all the ideals that people have. People are very dynamic, and for me, I think what spoke to me very
Yeah.
much was there's also it brings out a certain quality about being human, which probably you might not be able to see in people like Envy and Last
Mhm.
and these other characters who are homunculi, since they're just one compartmentalized unit about one thing. They just personify one thing. So
Mhm.
pretty much their actions plays around this pool of what has been designated for them. However, I think that was one quality that I think this is where, for me, this was something that sets them apart.
Mhm.
There's a basic human trait which is present in everyone. You always want more and more and more. Yes, definitely the book will only capture the much that the author was able to explore. And so the minute you just give the mind
Mm.
a taste of something that really intrigues it, it definitely wants to dig deeper, 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 and wants to just keep expanding its boundaries. I don't know how to what level, but I think that is something that is also was very much explored in that casino, in that whole statement that you just made right now. I think that's
Yeah.
something that sets them apart. What it means to be a human. At least I think that's where the anime was trying to like. I think all throughout the anime, it tries to answer this question that Michael also posed: what it is exactly, what is it exactly that makes a human a human? At least in the premise of Full Metal Alchemist. And wow, thank you, Mary, for bringing that up. I had forgotten that, but definitely,
And
I agree.
bringing that up,
Hmm.
bringing that up, Greed is actually one of the few characters who actually ends up having the most human mentality out of the rest of the homunculi. He is the one that badly wants to live, badly wants to he wants, basically, like Envy and the others sort of want something, but at the end of the day, whatever they want is very much in service to later on the person who becomes the main antagonist. But greed is not that. When given a chance later on in the series, greed makes the very interesting decision to not only side with the protagonist later on, but be his own person literally, and be uh, sort of uh, disattached, to not be attached to to the other homunculi. And that's a very interesting thing. But one thing I did want to point out, uh, even more than that, was how interesting that small scene sort of builds up to the very ending of the series. Because
Mm.
without necessarily saying too much, uh, Edward actually ends up giving up one of the most important things towards the end of the story, even if he had been chasing after information the whole journey, and he had been finding out, like, he has been having this very reserved feeling that alchemy has the answers to everything. And like at the end of the story, he's like, no, this isn't it. Even if alchemy seems to have answers, and it seems to give the impression that if I dig deep, I could find more, it's not going to give me the answers I need. And so the whole theme of wanting more and having to give up wanting more for the sake of others is indeed an interesting thing that really builds up all the way to the end.
Yes, you mentioned greed and how he kind of stood out from the rest.
Mhm.
He really did embody the concept of what it means to be greedy, I think, because he kept saying he wants the entire world.
Mhm.
And I think from the setting or the plot of Fullmetal Alchemist, generally it's pretty much a representation of how we live life or how we exist here right now, here and today, where we think that the entire creation is just our world and
Mhm.
the rest is just information we read.
Yeah.
So that was strongly in it. Yes, he did embody the whole breed thing, and more to that, I think about Edward. I think so much happened throughout the entire show, and when it comes to the culmination of realizing his dream, or realizing his goal, which was ideally to get Alphonse's body back. And I think that comes out clear, despite the fact that he said he wanted to get both their bodies back. He ended up remaining with one. Was it for one metallic limb? I don't know which was
Yeah.
remaining with the outer male, whether it's the hand or the leg.
Yeah.
And I think for him, there's also an aspect of he never wanted to forget what happened. Otherwise, this will happen again. It will end up happening again. And I think that's a very important theme that was kind of highlighted. I think that's something that most people might choose to ignore, but it's very important. Like you mentioned, the memory does form a very important constitutive part of what it means to carry on in this life, at least in this physical existence, which is survival, I guess. Sorry, I'm trying to really make something so simple complex. Sorry. Yes, and for him, I think at the end it was more of a sense of satisfaction which was there for him. And I think this is just my opinion, but I think he came to understand that finally, that yes, like you said, alchemy was not the answer for everything. It's just one more tool like everything else. And if you don't know how to exercise and employ your tools appropriately, at the end of the day, what happens is exactly how it started with them. It ends up in chaos where you try to fix every single problem in life with one single tool. Because I think at the end of the day, him finally being able to relinquish it, alchemy,
Yeah.
for him, because okay, for instance, when it begins, they talk of the principles of being an alchemist, and he's
Yeah.
so strongly rooted to him. And I think a lot of his personality and identity is formed around him taking on this personality or identity, sorry, of being an alchemist. And at the end, he doesn't discard it because he thinks it doesn't have any use. I think he just realized that whatever he wanted to achieve with this particular tool, alchemy being the tool, was realized. And he realized that I cannot keep carrying it forward in life. It's just like it's like trying to use a spoon for everything, combing your hair, writing your books, surfing the sea. You get. So I think there was a very much deep sense of of understanding the fundamental of what life is, or at least for him, how it's expressed, because there's a lot of satisfaction that he does express at the end of it all, when the show comes to its culmination or to its end. Or what do you guys think?
I do have a question before you give your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
To either of you, why was it so important to Edward that that he retained the memory of losing his limb at the
Towards
cost
the
of
end.
also retaining the memory? Yeah, at the cost of also retaining the memory associated with the pain
I
of that
think
whole incident. Why was it so important to do that?
now my memory of the ending is pretty vague. I do remember that he had given up alchemy completely and decided to turn over a new leaf. But I think if that was, I don't remember exactly the scene, but if that's kind of the thing we're getting to, if you were in his position, you would probably want to maintain the memories of what happened before, in the sense of those who don't study history end up repeating it sort of scenario, I think. But I cannot, for the sake of the audience who most probably are going to know more about this than we do, I think we will probably cover it once we get to a refresher. What do you think, children?
No, I completely am in concert with what you're saying, Michael. I think that's just what I expressed earlier on before. Maybe, yeah, definitely in undertones, but definitely it's there. It's definitely along the lines of not wanting to repeat what's happened before. And so that's a constant
Okay.
reminder.
I think a clearer answer will come
So
when,
that's why memory.
yeah. I think a clearer answer will come when we get there, so that we don't get jeered too hard on the day that we have comment sections and stuff. So
Okay. Okay.
we didn't
No
want
problem.
you guys claim to have watched the show, and
No
this is
problem.
exactly what you we didn't want to be in that situation. Speaking of
Okay, no problem, no problem.
speaking of being watching Fullmetal Alchemist, I don't think we can fully talk about it unless, because like it's a thing by now. Everybody who talks about Fullmetal Alchemist has to talk about episode 4, which is the whole Shotaka scenario and Nina and Alexander.
Yeah. Oh.
So what did you think about it the first time you're watching? Because that was the first major blow. That was the first time the show was like, we are not pulling any punches. Because episode 2 was sad, but like 4 was the moment where alchemy started feeling uh, dangerous. What was the first impression you guys had?
Shilu, you can go first.
All right. So for me, definitely, I think the very first time I watched the episode, I was so heartbroken. Keeping into consideration, sorry about that. Keeping in mind that everyone in this entire show has a very good character development. Again, I'm saying that. So, for instance, sure, the Seal Life Alchemist, how he comes into power of being certified as an alchemist was that he had to sacrifice the wife, and he had to now sacrifice the daughter and the daughter's pet just so he could realize his dream. I think something very important becomes very clear here, where the show clearly outlines that there is no such thing as good and bad. I think it's more of people always go out of their way to fulfill whatever they feel is important to them. And whenever somebody talks about their feelings or whatever is important or whatever is they're passionate about, you will feel there's always a sense of logic or a sense of reason that comes along the lines of how they try to break down what it is they're trying to explain. However, this is where also it comes very apparent that um, nothing is there, or nothing or is ever a straight line. Nothing is ever black and white, as how Sho tries to validate his own reasons for doing what he does. Clearly, he knows it's very wrong, whatever he's doing. Otherwise, why do you go out of your way to make up a story of why your wife left you when you very well know that you're the one who cost her life? I mean, and at the same time, the wife, the if you remember, there's a snippet of the scene where I think it was a monkey hybrid thing. I don't remember, where it was saying that the only statement that came from this chimeric hybrid was that it wants to die.
Yeah, I
So
remember.
definitely there's an aspect here of human sacrifice and everything. And um hmm, I feel there's a lot of forced situation. For instance, I feel for sure Shu Taka, he was sorry, I know I'm not probably pronouncing that name
It's okay.
properly, but yeah, for him, he has this something that he's passionate about. He wants to become, well, not necessarily passionate. Sorry, let me retract that statement. I don't think he's necessarily passionate about the chimeric whatever. I think it's just where his niche is in terms of alchemy, and he very well expresses that initially he was very poor, and I think no one ever wants to go back. Once you have tasted a little bit of affluence, something a little bit better, you never want to move backwards. And I think I don't know if it's just this only happened in season 3, but there's the interaction between Edward and Rose. But anyway, I think that one we can dissect it a little bit later. But yes, a lot of also the alchemist principles kind of really come out clear, where Edward tries to explain to this man that authority is not something that, or I don't remember if it was to this man, but I remember it was mentioned somewhere where Edward is trying to figure out what should be the authority. Should the authority, or what should be the truth? Should the truth be authority, or should authority be the truth? So yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of guilt, resentment, shame, and self-loath that really comes to the surface when Edward confronts this Sioux Life alchemist. And the Sioux Life alchemist kind of contradicts his ideals by telling him we're exactly the same. Or how different is it from what you did? Just because my intentions are different, we all knew what we were doing. And I think that's also another aspect to it. People are always aware of whatever it is they're doing. It's just that whatever desire you have is more of an important investment for you, that you push aside the moral aspect. I don't know if I made any sense, but I
No,
think that's
I
what
get
for
you. I
me
get you.
stood out.
I get you.
Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah, Shilton, I agree with what you're saying. And for me, what came to mind after watching that episode was a conversation I had with some of my colleagues on the idea of moral survival and what survival plus morality, what different stratas are created in society based on those two things. Some people just aim for survival and they will do whatever it takes to survive, minus the morality. And then there are people who will combine survival with morality, which is what we're calling moral survival. And that creates a certain strata in society also. Then so his was survival only. Shotaka he wanted to maintain the lifestyle that he had. So for Shotaka, it was just survival. He was going to do whatever it took for him to just maintain whatever lifestyle he had come to be accustomed to. So